If you look at the story of us as individuals, as people, as human souls, how did we get to where we are today? I'll start about 50,000 years ago. At that time, the Big Bang of culture happened. Us as Homo sapiens survived, and the Neanderthals died. The Neanderthals were stronger, more robust, a larger brain cavity, and we survived. The reason we survived was, as a species, we were the only mammal that understood the notion of social. In that defining moment, as we learned to cooperate with one another, we created the social environment that we then referred to as tribes. All our major decisions were made around food and the tribe or the family, and faith, where we lived, whom we got married to, how we brought up our children. And this continued for the time until the Industrial Revolution began. So fact number one is we are a social being. We are driven by our internal need to cooperate with other members of the species. Fact number two, as we look at the turn of the Industrial Revolution and the explosion of the job families, work changed in our definition as a species and a society. Engagement at work, being fully involved in it, had a tremendous spillover effect. Engagement at work made us better partners, better parents, better spouses, and better community members. And that is how I believe that when Kenexa was founded, on the basic tenet of serving humanity, we were able to accomplish that. In spreading that belief that an engaged employee is a better community member, and that's how we served humanity. And we went along that journey for about 25 years. So fact number two, engagement at work creates a better society. Fact number three is we're living in the best of times. I am in absolute awe of what we've accomplished as a species. We are more fortunate than 99.9% of the people that have walked on this planet. Now let me present my case using data. More people were taken out of poverty in the last 50 years than in the preceding 500 years according to the United Nations. Life expectancy in India has climbed by 40% in the last 60 years. We're leading a life which has better health than the Maharajas of the time of my grandfather. I today have a better access to health care, less pain, more enjoyment than the monarchs of 100 years ago. But when we are thinking about all the strife and turmoil on this planet and all the people that are dying every day, things aren't going well. Well, let me share a fact with you. In the last 50 years, deaths due to hostilities are down, repeat, down by 75%. Down by 50% from 20 years ago, and down by 99% since the decade of the Second World War. Economically, as a species, in the last 50 years, every decade has grown faster than the preceding decade, including the last one with the Great Recession. We have the ability today to absolutely change the epochal nature in which we're living as a species. We worry about water. 10 years ago, we heard commentary like the water is the new gold. Nanotechnology membranes today are allowing us to make brine or seawater potable by using tidal power. Water is no longer the new gold. Food, if anyone's been to Munich, you can see that city has already transformed 25% of its buildings using vertical farming, which uses 90% less land, 90% less water, zero transportation costs, and currently feeding 15% of their population just by the vertical farming that's carried out on their buildings. The rate of change, the technological advances are so dramatic that we have stopped from taking stock of what a tremendous life we're leading today. My grandmother left Gujarat in 1921 when she was 15 years old and married my grandfather in Dar es Salaam, Tanzania. She died in 2005. Never seen her sister in that 80-year span. It would be unthinkable today. Over 1 billion of us crossed an international boundary just last year alone in 1 year. 1 billion out of 7 billion people crossed it. The youth are amazing to me. They practice what I call this cosmopolitan ethic. It doesn't matter who your parents are, it's what you do. It's who you personally are. I don't care about your gender. I don't care about your sexual preference. I care about how you contribute into society. And I'll share a personal story with you. My daughter, who ended up being in investment banking in the mid-2000s, hated it and went to work for Mayor Bloomberg, planting 1 million trees in a not-for-profit situation in New York City, decided to then pack her bags and open up her own restaurant in Buenos Aires, Argentina. I don't know why she picked that spot, but having done that, she refused to pay off the cops, so they dug a hole in front of her restaurant, forcing her to go bankrupt. She comes home completely broke, but with a husband who's Argentine, of Croatian background, who doesn't speak English and no habla español. Think about the unintended consequences of that. If my grandchildren are now sitting in Buenos Aires 10 years from now, and the US and Argentina decide to go to war, I'm going to pick up the phone and call up my congressman. What we don't realize is that the number of deaths due to hostilities in the last 50 years has dropped by 90% due to intranational hostilities. We talk about all this noise between us in India and in Pakistan and Kashmir. How many deaths have happened? I don't want to minimize the ones that have happened. But 20 years ago, this would have been 1,000 people. Today, 5 hit the headlines. We're living in incredibly peaceful times. And I know Mumbai has been the target of attacks, of terrorism. But the number of lives lost is relatively tiny compared to where we were. We used to kill people in hundreds of thousands in our warfare. And when we look into the future, today exists technology where you can stick in an RFID tag under your skin in a jawbone speaker and replace your cell phone. And I know some of you are thinking, ew, I'm not going to ingest that stuff in my body. What's the worst form of ingestion there is? It's drugs, right? You take that internally. So let me ask you a question. What was the fastest selling drug? Viagra. Males took it for superhuman performance. So don't tell me people aren't going to ingest a jawbone. Speaking of jawbones, using 3D printing, a jawbone was printed using titanium to replace the jaw of an 83-year-old woman suffering from oral cancer. But what was remarkable about that device, it cost $86. The same device from a medical manufacturer was costing $16,000. We're driving down costs with a supply chain. We are truly living in a world of peaceful abundance. Life couldn't get better. So where is the risk? Is it the next election here in India? Is it that our growth rates are down to only 4% from 9%? I would argue that the single largest risk we face today to continue this epochal journey of humanity is the lack of meaningful work. Now, a lot of studies have been done, and a lot of different dimensions have been used to determine, quote, unquote, happiness of people. We've done it against wealth, we've done it against income, we've done it against family. The one that has the strongest correlation is this. The happiest people are the ones that have a calling in life. The second happiest are the ones that are in careers. The third happiest are the ones that are in jobs. The fourth happiest are ones that do not have a job and have no work. Meaningful work has changed. When we looked at it, it went from us providing food with the work we did, and then it started defining us as a family. And we took last names of that, whether it was Smith in England or a Panwala out of Hyderabad. Our last names indicated what we did. Today, it defines who we are. We say our family is most important. We talk about our faith. But if we were being brutally honest with ourselves, we realize we're spending multiples amount of time, physical time, emotional time, intellectual time on our work than on our children. It is who we are. We have this internal yearning for greatness that we were born in. None of us were born in a cradle and said, I want to lead the least meaningful life there is so that my passing is just like the wind. None of us ever grew up thinking this. We all grew up wanting to be great. Let me share a personal story with you. As an entrepreneur, somebody that started a bunch of companies in my life, an entrepreneur's dream is to take a company, take it public, and then sell it to this vast multinational for gazillion amount of dollars, right? This was the second largest transaction after Cognos by IBM. December 3rd, 2012 is when we closed, less than 12 months ago. I had reached the epitome of my goals. I cried myself to sleep that night. And at first I thought it was because I was worried about the employees. Then I thought I was worried about our customers. It was all about me. I'd lost meaning. For 25 years I woke up every morning saying how to make us better, how to get more customers, how to treat our employees better. I was so empty, I was a dried husk. And that meaningful work that we have is so important for us as a species, for the next stage of our growth, because when we look at the data, any form of hostility, whether it's World War I, World War II, over the last 2 millennia, has been driven by a single data point, and that is when youth male unemployment exceeds 30%, hostilities follow. And there is a reason for that, because we as a species were down to about 1,000 reproductive males at one point in time in our history. We have this genetic code to need to procreate. And the only way we can procreate as males is to have a spouse. And if you can't get the spouse, we can't procreate in today's society in a legitimate way. If we can't do that, we will rape and pillage. Meaningful work is so important that I would argue that it will form the foundation to the next, what I consider an epochal growth in the history of humanity. And this foundation that we will lay has a sense of responsibility that's threefold. Number one, it's to the private enterprise. The private enterprise has been responsible for 80% of the job growth in the world over the last 50 years. So as much as we love to berate the large corporates, because they're greedy and all they care about is money, the large corporates have allowed us to lead the lifestyle we have today. They've given a lot of us meaning for what we are doing. And it is now the responsibility of these large corporates to create a workforce that is more engaging, because what has happened is the supply chain is now shrunk to the point where we are now dehumanizing people in our enterprises. And in the process of dehumanization, we will create automatons which will then result in constant cutting practices, and no organization has become great through cutting. It is the organizations that have learned to engage their employee pool that has created the productivity that they need, which then leads to profits. And productivity by its very definition means, it's a very simple definition: sell more, spend less. And as Chief Human Resources Officers, it is our responsibility to ensure that we create that engaging environment. Because if we don't, then the employees that are working for us have got only two outcomes. One is the jobs are going to get cut, or the salaries are going to get cut. And two is they're going to be working for losing teams. And all of us want to work for winning teams. The second responsibility lies with society. The societal responsibilities are to create an environment which allows work to foster, whether it is through public policy, whether it is through job creation programs, whether it is through wise fiscal policy, whatever the case might be. And we're working with a number of different communities around the world where we are looking at ways to reinvent work, and those practices will allow those communities to be absolutely able to thrive. And the third is the role of the individual. Engagement at work is not a one-way street. It is not the responsibility solely of the employer. There is a personal responsibility associated with it. And that individual has to develop that sense of, where's my purpose, where's my passion, what's the economic engine I need in order to accomplish what I want to accomplish. And on that note, I'll end on dignity. Along with engagement at work, there's this notion of dignity. As we have dehumanized the workflow, due to the processes we've put in place, we are steadily stripping dignity of our workforce. If I asked you today, what is the job family you respect the most? Most people's minds automatically go through or a majority of people will go somebody in the medical profession, a doctor or a nurse or what have you. And the reason is because they give me health and they give me a longer life. I would argue that they don't. The number one reason for our longer, healthier lives is the loss of communicable diseases, which have now been stripped off society. The number one reason for the reduction of the loss of communicable diseases has been the removal of trash. The hardest part of that trash removal is that final mile that gets picked up. It's the mighty trash collector that is contributing to your health, your welfare, and your happiness, and your long life. And it's interesting. When's the last time you saw an old trash collector? And when I was talking to one of them, I said, how come I never see an old one? And they said, this is a tough job, sir. It breaks my body. They're giving up their body, so I lead a healthy life. Let's remember to bring dignity back into our work. There's no such thing as a dirty job.